Hi, welcome back to my channel. In my channel, we talk about literature, and today I'm going to read this one story, The Story of an Hour by Kate Chopin. Well, Kate Chopin was an American writer, a very brave one. She took up upon the themes which were quite not that acceptable at the moment. Nothing much actually, just the individualism of a woman as well, and that was quite a tabooish thing back in the time. Well, the thing that interested me the most is that her influences. She was influenced by Guy de Maupassant, the author of The Horla. We have already talked about The Horla in our lit talks. So yeah, I am excited to read her works because I really liked that story. So before wasting any okay, before that, I just want to remind that I'm not a professional reader, so there might be pauses or mispronunciations. So I'm extremely sorry about that. All right, let's start the story now. The Story of an Hour by Kate Chopin. Knowing that Mrs. Mallard was afflicted with a heart trouble, great care was taken to break to her as gently as possible the news of her husband's death. It was her sister Josephine who told her, in broken sentences, veiled hints that revealed in half concealing. Her husband's friend Richard was there too, near her. It was he who had been in the newspaper office when intelligence of the railroad disaster was received, with Brentley Mallard's name leading the list of killed. He had only taken the time to assure himself of its truth by a second telegram and had hastened to forestall any less careful, less tender friend in bearing the sad message. She did not hear the story as many women have heard the same, with a paralyzed inability to accept its significance. She wept at once, with sudden, wild abandonment in her sister's arm. When the storm of grief had spent itself, she went away in her room alone. She would have no one follow her. There stood, facing the open window, a comfortable, roomy armchair. Into this she sank, pressed down by the physical exhaustion that haunted her body and seemed to reach into her soul. She could see in the open square before her house the tops of the trees that were all equer with the new spring life. The delicious breath of rain was in the air. In the street below, a peddler was crying his beer. The note of a distant song which was someone was singing reached her faintly. The countless sparrows were twittering in her ears. There were patches of blue sky showing here and there through the clouds that had met and piled one above the other in the west facing her window. She sat with her head thrown back upon the cushions of the chair, quite motionless, except when a sob came up upon into her throat and shook her, as a child who has cried itself to sleep continues to sob in its dream. She was young, with a fair, calm face, which lines best spoke repression and even a certain strength. But now there was a dull stare in her eyes, whose gaze were fixed away off yonder on one of those patches of blue sky. It was not a glance of reflection, but rather indicated a suspension of intelligent thought. There was something coming to her, and she was waiting for it, fearfully. What was it? She did not know. It was too subtle and elusive to name. But she felt it, creeping out of the sky, reaching towards her through the sounds, the scents, the color that filled the air. Now her bosom rose and felt tumultuously. She was beginning to recognize this thing that was approaching to process her, and she was striving to beat it with the will, as powerless as her two white slender hands would have been. When she abandoned herself, a little whispered word escaped her slightly parted lips. She said it over and over under her breath. Free, free, free. The vacant stare and the look of terror that had followed it went from her eyes. They stayed keen and bright. Her pulses beat fast, and the coursing blood warmed and reflected every inch of her body. She did not stop to ask if it were or were not monstrous joy that held her. A clear and exalted perception enabled her to dismiss the suggestion as trivial. She knew that she would weep again when she saw the kind, tender hands folded in death, the face that had never looked save with love upon her, fixed and grey and dead. But she was beyond that bitter moment, a long processing of years to come that would belong to her absolutely. And she opened and spread her arms out to them in welcome. There would be no one to live for her during those coming years. She would live for herself. There would be no powerful will bending hers in that blind persistence with which men and women believe they have the right to impose a private will upon a fellow creature. A kind intention or a cruel intention make the act seem so less a crime as she looked upon it in that brief moment of illumination. And yet she had loved him sometimes, often she had not. What did it matter? What could love and unresolved mystery count for account for in face of this possession of self-assertion, which she suddenly recognized as the strongest impulse of her being? Free body and soul free, she kept whispering. Josephine was kneeling before the closed door with her lips to the keyhole, imploring for admission. Louis, open the door. I beg, open the door. You will make yourself ill. What are you doing, Louis? For heaven's sake, open the door. Go away, I am not making myself ill. No, she was drinking in a very elixir of life through that open window. Her fancy was running right along those days ahead of her, spring days and summer days and all sort of days that would be her own. She breathed a quick prayer that life might be long. It was only yesterday she had thought with a shudder that life might be long. She arose at length and opened the door to her sister's importunities. There was a feverish triumph in her eyes, and she carried herself unwittingly like a goddess of victory. She clasped her sister's waist, and together they descended the stair. Richard stood waiting for them at the bottom. Someone was opening the front door with a latch key. It was Bentley Mallard who entered, a little trivial stained, com- composedly carrying his grip sack and umbrella. He had been far from the scene of accident and did not even know there had been one. He stood amazed at Josephine's piercing cry, at Richard's quick motion to screen him from the view of his wife, but Richard was too late. When the doctors came, they said she had died of heart disease, of joy that kills. Goodness. Yeah, that was the story. Such a plot twist in the last line. When the doctors came, they said she had died of heart disease, of joy that kills. It reminds me of the first story that I read, the open window. Oh, actually, yeah, the open window. The last line was such a plot twist, and here in this story as well, we have an open window, and quite similar actually. Yeah, but oh my god, what I don't know if you have had this experience or not, but I have experienced this, and this is such a what do I say, it's a pity that we had to experience something like that, that somebody's presence makes you feel chained or caged or burdened, and even though it saddens you to your soul, you become free when they're gone. It's such a sad, and it's a horrible thing to experience, and I hope nobody else have to experience that. Wow, quite intense. It was just 1.5 page, and quite intense it was. This very fact that love, unresolved mystery, it is actually, well, it was written at that point of time, and it's understandable. But today we have moved on, we have walked a lot further, but still today we do not understand love. And this very thing that do not confuse your comforts with love. You want to be understood, but that doesn't mean that you can impose your expectations or your desires or anything, just your emotions upon somebody else, because that is also an individual with their own things. You cannot impose yourself upon them. This is such an important message. You have to understand love before loving somebody. It's wow. Wow. I would need some moment to reconcile everything and come to the normal state. But wow, what an amazing story. All right, so that's all for today. I'll go and think about it a little more, and I'll see you the next time. Till then, do whatever you want, unless it's hurting somebody else, of course. And wow, such an amazing story. Okay, okay. All right. Bye bye.